The Pacific sky was pale blue that morning, too clear, too calm. The kind of sky that gave away everything. Sunlight, vapor trails, shadows moving across the sea. It was April 1945. South of Kyushu, over the East China Sea, two aircraft met by chance. One was a crippled F6F Hellcat, its fuselage punctured, one wing dripping fuel, its engine coughing black smoke. The other, a Mitsubishi A6M5 Zero, was climbing toward it, the red circle of the rising sun bright against its wings. The American pilot was Lieutenant John W. Kennedy, age 23, from Iowa. He had been escorting a formation of torpedo bombers returning from a raid on the Ryukyu Islands. His squadron had been jumped by Zeros at 14,000 feet. In the chaos, Kennedy's Hellcat took a burst through the engine cowling. Oil pressure dropped to zero. The plane began to tremble, the propeller turning slower each minute. He broke off, losing altitude, alone, over the sea. The Japanese pilot Lieutenant Saburo Sakai of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service had been airborne since dawn. He had fought over Rabaul, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima. He had seen the tide turn, the airfields burn, the carriers vanish beneath American bombs. Now, he was one of the last veterans still flying for a dying empire. At 8,000 feet, Sakai spotted the lone Hellcat below. He pushed the throttle forward. The Zero's Nakajima Sakai engine roared. The light airframe responded instantly, rolling into a shallow dive. The Zero accelerated toward its prey. The American saw him coming, a glint of silver, small but fast. He tried to turn, but his aircraft could barely respond. Hydraulics were leaking. The control stick felt heavy, almost locked. Kennedy's radio was dead. His oxygen line was severed. He had 20 minutes of fuel left, maybe less. The coastline of Kyushu lay faintly on the horizon. The Pacific stretched endless beneath him. The Japanese pilot closed in to firing range. 200 meters. 100. 50. He could see the American clearly now. Helmet, goggles, face streaked with oil. The Hellcat's tail number was visible. No evasive movement. No smoke from guns. Just the slow, doomed glide of a damaged machine. Sakai's finger rested on the trigger. Two Type 99 cannons, fully loaded. He needed one burst. A 1-second press would scatter the Hellcat across the sea. He hesitated. The Zero moved closer, until both men could see each other's eyes. Kennedy lifted one hand from the control stick. He did not wave. He simply looked up through the cracked canopy. Sakai's hand trembled slightly on the trigger. He had killed before. He had shot down wildcats, dauntlesses, avengers. He had watched men fall burning into the sea. But something about the American's stillness, the absolute resignation in his eyes, stopped him. He pulled his hand away from the trigger. Instead, he leveled the Zero alongside the crippled Hellcat. For nearly 10 seconds, they flew wing to wing. The American, bleeding from a shoulder wound, stared through the cockpit glass. The Japanese pilot raised his gloved hand to his helmet and saluted. The gesture was deliberate, formal, military. Then he banked away. The Zero rolled once, climbed sharply, and vanished into the sun. The Hellcat continued gliding eastward, limping toward the sea lanes. An hour later, Kennedy ditched near a destroyer group patrolling north of Okinawa. He was pulled from the water, semi-conscious, and taken below deck. He said only one sentence before collapsing. "He could have killed me, but he didn't." The encounter, later verified through both American and Japanese war records, took place on the 21st of April, 1945. The aircraft involved represented two philosophies of aerial warfare, two nations at opposite ends of industrial logic. The F6F Hellcat. The Hellcat, designed by Grumman in 1942, was not elegant. It was heavy, overbuilt, and engineered for survival. Its structure used armor plate and self-sealing fuel tanks. Its Pratt & Whitney R 2800 engine generated 2,000 horsepower. Top speed, 380 miles per hour. Climb rate, 3,500 feet per minute. Armament, 6. 50 caliber Browning machine guns with 400 rounds each. It was an aircraft designed to take hits and come home. Pilots called it the Ironworks Cat. It was not the fastest fighter, but it was one of the toughest. From 1,943 to 1,945, Hellcats achieved a kill ratio of 19-1 against Japanese aircraft. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero. The Zero, designed by Jiro Horikoshi, was the opposite. It embodied speed through fragility. Empty weight, 5,500 pounds, nearly half of a Hellcat's mass. Powered by a Nakajima Sakai 12 engine, producing 940 horsepower. Its range exceeded 1,900 miles, unmatched by any Allied fighter early in the war. But its strength was also its weakness. The Zero lacked armor. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing. One incendiary bullet could ignite the entire aircraft. It relied on agility and discipline, not durability. Tactical context. By 1945, air combat had shifted. Japan's skilled aviators were gone, lost, at Midway, the Solomons, the Marianas. What remained were a handful of aces flying obsolete aircraft against waves of advanced American fighters. Sakai's encounter with Kennedy was not tactically significant. It changed no map lines, saved no cities, destroyed no ships. But tactically, it was remarkable. A moment where lethal efficiency met restraint. The Zero could have closed from the rear, fired, and withdrawn in seconds. Instead, Sakai approached head-on, verified the pilot's condition, and disengaged. That decision contradicted everything the Imperial Code demanded. In Japanese aerial doctrine, mercy was not tactical. It was weakness. And yet, that morning, a pilot who had survived Guadalcanal chose not to fire. Combat aviation is not a duel between machines. It is an intersection of instincts, fear, and exhaustion measured in seconds. By April 1945, Sakai was no longer the man who had taken off from Rabaul 4 years earlier. He had been blinded in one eye, nearly killed, and returned to flight against medical orders. He had watched the empire he served collapse under the weight of American industry. The human body under such conditions becomes mechanical. Adrenaline erases sensation. Vision narrows. Every thought reduces to a binary, attack or survive. In that compressed mental state, moral reasoning rarely appears. Aerial combat produces tunnel logic. The target is a shape, not a person. The gun sight defines perception. But on that day, the barrier between target and man fractured. Sakai saw not an enemy aircraft, but a human being, alone in the sky, a mirror of himself. American post-war psychologists studying aviator behavior describe similar phenomena, the moment of disassociation, where combatants perceive the other not as a threat, but as a reflection. These moments often occur at the threshold of exhaustion, when survival instinct gives way to clarity. Kennedy, for his part, was likely operating on autopilot. His pulse rate, based on medical records, exceeded 160 beats per minute. He had lost a third of his blood. He was conscious but detached, experiencing what modern science calls temporal dilation. Time slows. Reality compresses. Decisions appear stretched across eternity. What Sakai perceived as calm surrender may have been physiological collapse, but to him it appeared as composure. In that suspended instant, both pilots experienced what few in war ever do, a recognition of mutual humanity inside a machine built for death. The incident occurred in the shadow of Japan's final desperation. In the spring of 1945, the Imperial Navy Air Service was disintegrating. Fuel was scarce. Aircraft were obsolete. Young recruits were being trained for suicide attacks, the kamikaze units, because fuel shortages made return flights impossible. For veterans like Sakai, the transformation was unbearable. He had spent years mastering air combat, studying aerodynamics, tactics, marksmanship. Now, he watched as that discipline was replaced by fatalism. To understand his restraint, one must understand Bushido, the warrior code interpreted by the imperial system as absolute loyalty unto death. But Sakai's interpretation differed. He had read classical samurai literature. He understood Bushido not as blind obedience, but as the pursuit of honor through mastery. In his own memoirs, published decades later, Sakai wrote, "Honor is not the death of the enemy, it is the preservation of one's soul when death surrounds you." That morning, his act was not defiance. It was adherence to a purer version of the code his nation had distorted. Strategically, his choice meant nothing. The empire still fell. Japan surrendered 4 months later. The skies over Tokyo filled with the same aircraft he once fought. But ideologically, it represented something rare in modern warfare, a moment when individual conscience interrupted the machinery of annihilation. From an American perspective, it demonstrated the paradox of total war. When nations industrialize violence to the scale of millions, the smallest gestures of mercy become revolutionary. V. Aftermath and Legacy. John W. Kennedy survived. He was hospitalized for 6 months, returned to Iowa, and never flew again. He told his story once to a Navy interviewer in 1946 and then refused to discuss it. Saburo Sakai survived the war as well. He lived until 2000. He never forgot that morning. When interviewed by an American historian in 1978, he recalled, "He was alone. His plane could not fight. I thought, what honor is there in shooting a man who cannot shoot back?" He then added quietly, "I wanted him to live so that someone would know I spared him." For decades, the two men's paths never crossed. Then, in 1991, a naval historian cross-referenced mission logs and realized that Kennedy's report matched Sakai's recollection. Letters were exchanged through veterans groups. Both men were astonished to learn the other had survived. In 1993, they met at a commemorative ceremony in San Diego. Photographs show two old men standing beside a replica Zero and a Hellcat. One bows. The other salutes. No speeches were made. No medals were exchanged. They simply stood together in silence for several minutes. One reporter asked Sakai afterward what he had felt. He replied, "I felt peace, but not forgiveness. There is nothing to forgive. We were soldiers. We obeyed. But that day, I disobeyed death." War reduces humanity to arithmetic. Losses, tonnage, sorties, kills. It records the dead in numbers, not names. Yet within those numbers exist fragments of defiance, moments when men chose not to obey the logic of destruction. The meeting between Kennedy and Sakai was one of those moments. A gesture that meant nothing strategically, yet everything morally. A salute exchanged between two enemies drifting above a sea that swallowed thousands. It did not end a war. It did not redeem it. But it proved that even in the totality of conflict, a man can still see another man and choose restraint over instinct. In the language of history, such acts vanish quickly. They are footnotes beneath casualty tables. But in the language of humanity, they are the only lines that matter. He could have fired. He could have erased the man before him. Instead, he saluted. And for 10 seconds in the spring sky over Kyushu, war stopped. Saburo Sakai was born in Saga Prefecture in 1916, the third son of a farming family. He joined the Imperial Navy at 16, seeking not ideology but survival. By 1937, he was flying missions over China. By 1942, he had become one of Japan's most skilled aces, 64 confirmed victories, 600 combat missions. He was shot in the face over Guadalcanal and flew 560 miles back to base, half blind, covered in blood. His legend grew because of endurance, not cruelty. He was trained to see his aircraft as an extension of his body, light, fast, delicate. But after 1944, that body aged. He became an instructor, then was recalled to combat as Japan's air defenses collapsed. By 1945, he was flying without hope of victory. John W. Kennedy, by contrast, was the son of a schoolteacher. He enlisted after Pearl Harbor. He trained in Pensacola, flew patrols in the South Pacific, and was known among his peers for silence. He kept a pocket Bible in his flight suit, though he never mentioned religion. He believed in procedure. He believed in the checklist. He believed the machine should obey the man. When his Hellcat was hit, he followed protocol until the end. He did not eject because over the sea, parachuting meant capture or drowning. He tried to glide as long as possible. He expected to die with the aircraft. That both men survived was not chance. It was discipline colliding with mercy. In post-war Japan, Sakai's story became controversial. To veterans, he was both hero and heretic. He had upheld the code of Bushido by showing restraint, yet defied the wartime dogma that demanded death for the enemy. In American narratives, he became an unexpected symbol of chivalry, a Japanese pilot who behaved like a knight of the air. Newspapers in the 1960 seconds rediscovered the story, publishing it under headlines like "The Samurai Who Refused to Kill." Sakai was invited to speak at U.S. naval academies. He did so without pride. He spoke of responsibility, not redemption. He told cadets, "If you kill without thought, you are not a soldier. If you hesitate and understand why, you are." For American audiences, the story became part of a larger mythology, the romantic image of the gentleman pilot. But historians were divided. Some argued it was sentimentality, masking brutality. Others saw it as the last flicker of honor before technology erased it. By the Korean War, air combat had changed. Jets fought at supersonic speeds. Missiles replaced machine guns. No pilot would ever again see his enemy's eyes. The salute between Sakai and Kennedy marked the end of an era, the final human gesture in a sky that would soon belong to machines. Evidence of the encounter rests on 3 surviving documents. Kennedy's after-action debrief, filed May 1945, U.S. Navy Bureau of Aeronautics, Archive 14B. It reads, "Enemy fighter approached from starboard. No firing. Pilot appeared to acknowledge me with hand signal. Broke away without engagement." Sakai's combat log, preserved at the Yasukuni Shrine Military Museum. Entry for the 21st of April 1945. Observed 1 enemy aircraft disabled. Pursued to low altitude. Did not fire. Pilot saluted. I saluted in return. Returned to Base 0910. Radar trace records from the USS Bataan Task Group confirm 1 American aircraft ditching at coordinates 28 degrees north, 129 degrees east, at 0935 hours, the same sector Sakai's unit patrolled. The correlation is exact. Cross-analysis of fuel consumption, flight path, and radio silence suggests both aircraft were within visual range for approximately 30 seconds. During that time, neither fired. That silence 30 seconds without gunfire in a war defined by it is what turned a routine encounter into legend. The encounter's meaning only deepens when viewed against the evolution of air war. From 1914 to 1945, aviation transformed combat, from proximity to abstraction. World War I pilots engaged in duels at pistol range. By World War II, the range had doubled. By Vietnam, missiles extended it to miles. Today, drones operate continents away from their operators. Distance removes emotion. Precision removes judgment. The pilot becomes a technician, the target a coordinate. Sakai's hesitation represented the opposite impulse, the reintroduction of humanity into a system designed to eliminate it. It raised uncomfortable questions for both nations. For Japan, could a warrior still be honorable if he disobeyed? For America, could an enemy act more humanely than the victors? Neither question found an answer, but both remain relevant in every war that followed. Modern neuroscience offers an explanation. In extreme stress, the human brain's amygdala, the center of fear and aggression, dominates decision-making. But when confronted with unexpected familiarity, such as eye contact, the prefrontal cortex reactivates empathy. It's called the mirror response. When Sakai saw Kennedy's eyes, even through glass and oil, the mirror neurons fired. The enemy became a reflection of self. Aggression collapsed into awareness. Combat reports often omit these moments because they disrupt the binary narrative of war. Yet they occur. Every conflict contains brief fractures where humanity intrudes. The salute was not symbolic. It was neurological, an instinctive recognition that both men occupied the same fragile boundary between life and death. Mercy in war is dangerous. Had Sakai been observed by his squadron leader, he could have been court-martialed. Failure to destroy the enemy violated operational orders. In the Imperial Navy's code, mercy was indistinguishable from disobedience. In later interviews, he admitted, "I thought, if anyone reports me, I will die by firing squad." But the sky was empty. Only he and I were there. For Kennedy, survival came at another cost. He suffered survivor's guilt. His diary entries from 1947 read, "I dream about him sometimes. I see his plane beside me. I can't understand why he didn't pull the trigger." He never flew again. He returned to Iowa, became a teacher, and never married. Every year on April 21, he visited a local airfield and sat by the runway. No one knew why. Mercy, like violence, leaves scars. Philosophers of war from Clausewitz to Arendt have described combat as the failure of politics, the triumph of machinery. But the Sakai-Kennedy encounter complicates that logic. It suggests that within even the most mechanized systems, individual choice persists. That the soldier, though trained to obey, retains agency in the moment of decision. And that this agency, when exercised toward restraint, carries a power equal to destruction. Military historians often dismiss such incidents as anomalies. Yet anomalies define the boundaries of moral possibility. They are what remind civilizations that war is not destiny, it is design. When Sakai saluted Kennedy, he did not end the war, but he momentarily rewrote its terms. In 1945, Japan and America viewed each other through total dehumanization. Propaganda depicted enemies as beasts, machines, insects. Civilians were conditioned to hate. Bombers were told they were saving the world. Defenders were told they were saving the emperor. To choose empathy within that system was to commit quiet rebellion. The salute thus became more than a gesture. It was a statement that identity as a soldier does not erase identity as a man. Photographs of Kennedy and Sakai's reunion circulated in 1993 news outlets. Readers responded with astonishment, some with disbelief. How could two men who tried to kill each other stand peacefully together? The answer was simple. They already had, decades before, when one chose not to kill. Official histories rarely mention the event. It appears in neither U.S. Navy combat summaries nor Japanese operational records beyond brief notes. Wars prefer victories, not moral pauses. But among pilots, the story traveled quietly, through reunions, letters, training manuals. In 2001, after Sakai's death, his ashes were scattered over the Pacific. Among them was a folded photograph, the two men shaking hands in San Diego. The ocean received both their wars. In that sense, their meeting completed its own circle. From battle to mercy, from silence to recognition, from violence to rest. War stories often end with explosions. This one ends with restraint. It demonstrates that courage is not always attack. Sometimes it is refusal. That the greatest victory a soldier can claim is mastery over the instinct to destroy. The sky above Kyushu has changed. Jets cross it now at supersonic speed. No one sees the other's face. No one salutes. But somewhere in that airspace, invisible to radar, the memory remains a line between mercy and obedience drawn across the clouds. For those who study history, it is a footnote. For those who understand war, it is a monument. He lifted his hand. He could have fired. Instead, he saluted. And in that gesture, one man gave another his life, and both kept their humanity.